Chapter 3 of The Web of Indian Life by the Sister Nivedita, Margaret E. Noble. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 3 of the Hindu Woman as Wife. Of the ideal woman of the religious orders, the West today has very little notion. Teresa and Catherine are now but high-sounding names in history. Beatrice, a true daughter of the Church, is beloved only of the poets. And Joan of Arc, better understood, is rightly felt to be by birth the nun, but by genius the knight. Yet without some deeper sense of kindred with these, it will be hard to understand a Hindu marriage. For a Hindu bride comes to her husband much as the Western woman might enter a church. Their love is a devotion, to be offered in secret. They know well that they are the strongest influence, each in the other's life, but before the family there can be no assertion of the fact. Their first duty is to see that the claims of others are duly met, for the ideal is that a wife shall, if that be possible, love her husband's people as she never loved her own, that the new parents shall be more to her than the old, that she can bring no gift into their home so fair as a full and abundant daughterhood, and a confirmation of their supreme place in their son's love. Both husband and wife must set their faces towards the welfare of the family. This, and not that they should love each the other before all created beings, is the primal intention of marriage. Yet for the woman supreme love also has a duty. Only to the man his mother must stand always first. In some sense, therefore, the relation is not mutual. And this is in full accordance with the national sentiment, which stigmatizes affection that asks for equal return as shopkeeping. When her husband is present or before honored guests, the young wife may not obtrude herself on the attention of her elders. She sits silent with veil drawn, plying a fan or doing some little service for her new mother. But through the work of the day she is a trusted helpmate, and the relation is often very sweet. Nothing is so easy to distinguish as the educational impress of the good mother-in-law. Dignity, with gaiety and freedom, is its great feature. The good breeding of the Hindu woman is so perfect that it is not noticed till one comes across the exception. Some spoilt child, perhaps, who, as heiress or beauty, has been too much indulged, and her self-assertedness and want of restraint, though the same behavior might seem decorous enough in the English girl of her age, will serve as some measure for the real value of the common standard. It is not merely in her quietness and modesty, however, that the daughter-in-law betrays good training. She has what remains with her throughout life, a savoir-faire that nothing can disturb. I have never known this broken, and I saw an extraordinary instance of it when a friend, the shyest of orthodox women, consented to have her photograph taken for one who begged it with urgency. She stipulated, naturally, that it should be done by a woman, but this was found to be impossible. "Then let it be an Englishman," she said with a sigh, evidently shrinking painfully from the idea of a man, yet feeling that the greater the race distance, the less would be the impropriety. The morning came and the Englishman arrived, but in the Indian gentlewoman who faced him there was no trace of self-consciousness or fear. A superb indifference carried her through the ordeal, and would have been sufficient protection in some real difficulty. All the sons of a Hindu household bring their wives home to their mother's care, and she, having married her own daughters into other women's families, takes these in their place. There is thus a constant bubbling of young life about the elderly woman, and her own position becomes a mixture of a mother suzeraine and lady abbess. She is well aware of the gossip and laughter of the girls amongst themselves, though they become so demure at her entrance. Whispering goes on in corners, and merriment waxes high even in her presence, but she ignores it discreetly and devotes her attention to persons of her own age. In the early summer mornings she smiles indulgently to find that one and another slipped away last night from her proper sleeping place, and betook herself to the roof, half for the coolness and half for the mysterious joys of girls' midnight gossip. The relationship, however, is as far from familiarity as that of any kind and trusted prioress with her novices. The element of banter and freedom has another outlet, in the grandmother or whatever aged woman may take that place in the community house. Just as at home the little ones had coaxed and appealed against the decisions of father or mother to the ever-ready grandam, so, now that she is bride, she finds some old woman in her husband's home who has given up her cares into younger hands and is ready to forego all responsibility in the sweetness of becoming a confidant. One can imagine the rest. There must be many a difficulty, many a perplexity, in the new surroundings, but to them all old age can find some parallel. Looking back into her own memories, the grandmother tells of the questions that troubled her when she was also a bride, of the mistakes that she made, and the solutions that offered. Young and old take counsel together, and there is even the possibility that when the mother-in-law is unsympathetic, her own mother-in-law may intervene on behalf of the grandson's wife. Before the grandmother, therefore, there is none of that weight of reverence which can never be lightened in the mother's presence. Even the veil need not be dropped. The familiar thou takes the place of the stately you, and there is no respect shown by frigid reserve. Long ago, when a child's solemn betrothal often took place at 7 or 8 years of age, it was to gratify the old people's desire to have more children about them that the tiny maidens were brought into the house. It was on the grandmother's lap that the little ones were made acquainted. It was she and her husband who watched anxiously to see that they took to each other, and it was they again who petted and comforted the minute granddaughter-in-law in her hours of homesickness. Marriage has grown later nowadays, in answer amongst other things to the pressure of an increasing poverty, and it does not happen so often that an old man is seen in a bazaar buying consoling gifts for the baby brides at home. But the same instinct still obtains, of making the new home a place of choice when between her 12th and 14th year, the girl's age at her first and second marriages, the young couple visit alternately in each other's families. The Hindu theory is that a long vista of common memory adds sweetness even to the marriage tie, and whether we think this is true or not, we have all known happy marriages on such a basis. But about the mutual sentiment of old and young there can be no theory, because there is no possibility of doubt. In all countries in the world it is recognized as amongst the happiest things in life. The reminiscence of Arjuna, one of the heroes of the great war epic, gives us the Indian explanation of this fact. I climbed on his knee, he says, speaking of the aged knight Bhishma, head of his house. All hot and dusty from my play, and flinging my arms about his neck, I called him father. Nay, my child, he replied, as he held me to his breast, not thy father, but thy father's father. With each generation, that is to say, the tie is deepened and intensified. In all cases where 100 or 200 persons live under the same roof, a complex etiquette grows up, by which gradations of rank and deference are rigidly defined. Under the Hindu system, this fund of observation has so accumulated that it amounts now to an accomplished culture, a completed criticism of life, rich in quaint and delightful suggestions for humanity elsewhere. We may not know why a mother's relatives are apt to be dearer than a father's, but the statement will be approved as soon as made. It has not occurred to us that our relations to an elder sister and a younger one are not the same. In India there is a different word for each, for whole worlds of sweetness lie a world apart in one name and the other, to the Hindu mind. Yet a cousin is constantly called brother or sister, or one relation being merged entirely in the other. The mere use of a language with this degree of definiteness implies an emotional training of extraordinary kind. It is, of course, best suited to natures of great richness of feeling. In these, sentiment is developed in proportion to expression, and the same attitude that makes everyone in the village aunt or uncle to the children produces the ultimate sense of kinship to the world. This is perhaps the commonest characteristic of Hindu men and women. Shy at first and passive to slight stimulus, as are all great forces, when once a relationship is established, they believe in it absolutely, blindly, are ready to go to the uttermost in its name, and forget entirely all distance of birth or difference of association. The weak point in the system appears when it has to deal with the harder, more arid class of natures. In these there is less inner response to the outer claim. Expressions of difference therefore become less sincere and more abject. This is but a poor preparation for the open air of the modern world, where seniority, sanctity, and rank have all to be more or less ignored, and man stands face to face with man, free and equal so far as the innate manhood of each can carry. But such persons, though naturally enough they cluster round the powerful foreigner as moths about a lamp, are the failures of Hinduism, not its types, and they are very few. In a perfected education, Western ideals of equality and struggle would present themselves to these for their choosing, while far away in Europe, maybe, hearts born too sensitive for their more rudimentary emotional surroundings would be thankful in turn to find life made richer by Indian conceptions of human relationship. In the community like that of the Indian home, as in all clan systems, the characteristic virtue of every member must be a loyal recognition of common duties and dangers. and this is so. The wife who refuses to share her husband's obligations to a widowed sister and her children was never known in India. Times of stress draw all parts of the vast group together. None of the blood can cry in vain for protection and support. Even a village connection, i.e., one who is kin by association only, finds refuge in his hour of need. This great nexus of responsibility takes the place of workhouse, hospital, orphanage, and the rest. Here the lucky and unlucky are brought up side by side. For the ripe and young genius of the East, it has always been clear that the defenseless and unfortunate require a home, not a barrack. Into this complex destiny the bride enters finally, about her 14th year. Till now she has been a happy child, running about in freedom, feet shod and head bare, eating and drinking what she would. Till now life has been full of indulgences, for her own parents, with the shadow of this early separation hanging over them, have seen no reason for a severity that must bring in its train an undying regret. From the moment of her betrothal, however, the girl's experience gradually changes. Just as the young nun, if she runs to find her thimble, will be sent back to bring it more religiously, so about the newly married girl there grows a subtle atmosphere of recollectedness. The hair is parted, no longer childishly brushed back, and at the parting, showing just beyond the border of the veil with which her head now is always covered, appears a touch of vermilion, put there this morning as she dressed in token that she wished long life to her husband, much as one might, in taking up a fan, blow a kiss from its edge to some absent beloved one. The young wife's feet are unshod, and the gold wedding bracelet on the left wrist, and a few ornaments appropriate to her new dignity, supply the only hint of girlish vanity. But she has more jewels. These that she wears daily are of plain gold, more or less richly worked, but on her wedding night she wore the siti, or three-lined coronal, set with gems, and arms and neck were gay with flashing stones. All these were her dower, given by her father to be her personal property, and not even her husband can touch them without her consent, though he will add to them occasionally at festive moments. She will wear them all, now and again, on great occasions, but meanwhile the silver anklets and the golden necklet and a few bangles are enough for daily use. The girl knows her right to her own ornaments quite well, and the world will never hear how often the wife or the mother has hastened to give up the whole of this little resource in order that son or husband might weather a storm or receive an education. The one thing from which she will never part, however, unless widowhood lays its icy hand upon her life, is that ring of iron covered with gold and worn on the left wrist, which is the sign of the indissoluble bond of her marriage, her wedding ring, in fact. With all the shyness of the religious novice comes the girl to her new home. Its very form, with its pillared courtyards, is that of a cloister. The constant dropping of the veil in the presence of a man, or before a senior, is the token of a real retirement, the sacrament of actual seclusion, within which all the voices of the world lose distinctness and individuality, becoming but faint echoes of that which alone can call the soul and compel the eager foot. For India has no fear of too much worship. To her all that exists is but a mighty curtain of appearances, tremulous now and again with breaths from the unseen that it conceals. At any point a pinprick may pierce the great illusion, and the seeker become aware of the infinite reality beyond. And who so fitted to be the widow of the eternal presence as that husband, who is at once most adored and loved of all created things? For there is a deep and general understanding of the fact that only in its own illumination, or its own feeling, can the soul find its highest individuation. To learn how she can offer most becomes thus the aim of the young wife's striving. All her dreams are of the saints, women mighty in renunciation. Sita, whose love found its richest expression in the lifelong farewell that made her husband the ideal king. Sati, who died rather than to hear a word against Siva, even from her own father. And Uma, realizing that her love was given in vain, yet pursuing the more eagerly the chosen path. Be like Savitri was her father's blessing, as he bade her the bridal farewell, and Savitri, the Alcestis of Indian story, was that maiden who followed even death till she won back her husband's life. Thus wifehood is thought great in proportion to its giving, not to its receiving. It would never occur to anyone, in writing fiction or delineating actual character, to praise a woman's charms as we praise Sarah Jennings, on the score that she retained her husband's affection during her whole life. A good man, says the Hindu, does not fail his wife, but, apart from this, coquetry and vanity however pleasing in their form, could never dignify marriage. Lifelong intimacy, to be beautiful, must boast deeper foundations. The wife's love, daring all and asking for no return. The mother's gentleness that never changes. The friend's unswerving generosity. To the grave Oriental there is something indecorous in the discussion of the subject on any but its highest basis. And yet Persia, the father of Asia, must have been a perpetual influence between Romanticism and Hindu life. There is said to be no love poetry in the world so impassioned as the Persian. The famous verse, "Four eyes met, there were changes in two souls, and now I cannot remember whether he is a man and I a woman, or he a woman and I a man. All I know is, there were two. Love came, and there is one." We must believe completely representative of its spirit. The Persian language, however, has only touched India through the court of Delhi and through letters. It has been the possession of the Indo-Mohammedan, and of any man here and there who took the time and trouble to master its literature. But the world of Hindu womanhood has remained probably as remote from it as though it belonged to another planet. This is not true to the same extent of the romantic aspect of Christianity. The letters taught in English schools result very much in novel reading, and an indigenous school of fiction has grown up, in the form of books and magazines, which is likely to modify popular ideas on this subject profoundly. Meanwhile, and for a long time to come, it remains true that according to the Hindu notions, the eyes of bride and bridegroom are to be directed towards the welfare of the family and not of themselves as the basis of society. It is the great springs of helpfulness and service, rather than those of mutual love and romantic happiness, that marriage is expected to unloose selfish wives and jealous husbands. Husbands there must be, as among all peoples, but it is a fact, nevertheless, that here the absolute stainlessness of the wife is considered but preliminary to the further virtue demanded of her, the sustaining of the honor of her husband's house. With this clue it becomes easy to understand even what the West considers to be the anomalies of Hindu custom, the laws regarding rare cases of polygamy and adoption. For it is legally provided that if a woman remain childless, her husband may, after 7 years, and with her permission, take a second wife, in the hope of gaining a son, to succeed to his place. On the European basis of individualism, the permission would probably be impossible to obtain, but with the Eastern sense of family obligation, this has not always been so, and I have myself met the son of such a marriage whose story was of particular interest. The elder wife had insisted that the time was come for the alternative to be tried, and had herself chosen the speaker's mother, as the most beautiful girl she could find, for her husband. The marriage once over, she made every effort to make it a success, and welcomed the new wife as a younger sister. Not only this, but when the son was born, such was her tenderness that he was 12 years old before he knew that she was not his mother. After her death, however, the younger wife became head of the house. Amongst the children to be fed, there were degrees of kindred, certain adopted orphans, 2 or 3 cousins, and himself. He was the eldest of all, and protested loudly that he came in last, and his cousins only second, for his mother's attentions. "Nay, my child," she answered, with a Hindu woman's sweetness and good sense. "If I desired to neglect thee, I could not do it. Is it not right then first to serve those who have no protection against me?" The family life which such a story discloses is singularly noble, and it is not necessary to suppose that polygamy entailed such generosities oftener than we find monogamy do amongst ourselves. In any case, the same tide that brings in individualism has swept away this custom, and whereas it never was custom, it is now practically obsolete, except for princes and great nobles, and even amongst these classes there are signs of a radical change of custom. Where women are honored, there the gods are pleased. Where they are dishonored, religious acts become of no avail. In whatever family the husband is contented with his wife, and the wife with her husband, in that house will good fortune assuredly abide. Few books offer such delights to their readers as that known as the Laws of Manu. It is in a sense a collection of Acts of Parliament, for the one attitude throughout is that of the witness, and the hastiest perusal shows that it represents the growth of custom during ages, and is in no sense the work of a single hand. This is indeed at first the most striking beauty. As must be, of course, it often happens that the superstition of a habit is stated as gravely as its original intent, but rarely so as to obscure that first significance, or leave it difficult of restoration. And from cover to cover the book throbs with the passion for justice. and the appreciation of fine shades of courtesy and taste, clothed in calm and judicial form. Especially of this type are the dicta on the rights of women, which are household words in Indian homes. We all know the reaction of the written word on life. Fact once formulated as scripture acquires new emphasis, a certain occult significance seems to attach to it, and the words, "it is written," become terrible enough to affright the devil himself. In this way, the fear of a feminine curse has become a superstition in India, and I have seen even a low-class mob fall back at the command of a single woman who opposed them. For is it not written in the book of the law that the house which is cursed by woman perishes utterly, as if destroyed by a sacrifice for the death of the enemy? Strange and graphic old phrase, pregnant of woe. It is evident then that the laws of Manu are rather the unconscious expression of the spirit of the people than a declaration of the ideals towards which they strive. And for this reason they would afford the most reliable foundation for the healthy criticism of Indian custom. The conception of domestic happiness which they reveal is very complete, and no one who has seen the light of an Indian woman's face when it turns to her husband, as I have seen it in all parts of the country, can doubt that that conception is often realized in life. For if the characteristic emotion of the wife may be described as passionate reverence, that of the Hindu husband is certainly a measureless protection. If we may presume to analyze things so sacred as the great mutual trusts of life, it would seem that tenderness is the ruling note of the man's relation. Turning as he does to the memory of his own mother for the ideal perfection, there is again something of motherhood in what he brings to his wife. As a child might do, she cooks for him and serves him, sitting before him as he eats to fan away the flies. As a disciple might, she prostrates herself before him, touching his feet with her head before receiving his blessing. It is not equality, no, but who talks of a vulgar equality, asks the Hindu wife, when she may have instead the unspeakable blessedness of offering worship. And on the man's side, how is this received? Entirely without personal vanity. The idea that adoration is the soul's opportunity has sunk deep into the life of the people, and the husband can recognize his wife's right to realize her highest through him without ever forgetting that it is her power to love, not his worthiness of love, that is being displayed. Indeed, is not life everywhere of one tint in this regard? Does anything stir our reverence like an affection that we feel beyond our merit? It is often glibly said that this habit of being served spoils the Indian man and renders him careless of the comfort of others. I have never found this to be so. It is true that Indian men do not rise when a woman enters, and remain standing till she is seated, nor do they hasten to open the door through which she is about to pass. But then it is not according to the etiquette of their country to do these things. With regard to the last point, indeed, their idea is that man should precede woman, maintaining the tradition of the path-breaker in the jungle. And one of the most touching incidents in the national epic of heroic love is Sita's request to go first along the forest paths, in order to sweep the thorns from her husband's path with the end of her veil. Needless to say, such a paradox is not permitted. Thus, honor for the weaker is expressed in one way in England and quite otherwise in Hindustan. But the heart of conduct is the same in both countries. The courtesy of husbands to their wives is quite unfailing amongst Hindus. "Thou shalt not strike a woman, even with a flower," is the proverb. His wife's desire for companionship on a journey is the first claim on a man, and it is very touching to notice how, as years go on, he leans more and more to the habit of addressing her as, "O thou, mother of our son," and presenting her with newcomers as "my children's mother," thus reflecting upon her his worship of motherhood. In early manhood he trusts to her advice to moderate the folly of his own rasher inclinations. In old age he becomes, as everywhere in the world, more entirely the eldest of her bairns, and she more and more the real head and center of the home. But always she remains as she was at the beginning, Lakshmi, her husband's goddess of fortune. In those first days he ate from no hand but his mother's or hers, and one of her devotions was the fast, not broken till he had eaten and their talk was over, though her evening meal might in this way be delayed till long past midnight. Now, with the responsibilities of her household upon her, she feeds a whole multitude before she takes her own turn, and still the mutual pact of soul and soul has not been broken by the strife of rights. These two have all these years been each other's refuge against the world, and not once have they felt so separated as to offer thanks or speak either of the other by name, as if head and hand could be different individuals. On her first bridal evening, the little bride was borne before her young husband, and they were told that the moment was auspicious for their first shy look. Then the old Vedic fire was called to witness their rites of union. The girl flung the garland of flowers about the neck of her bridegroom, in exquisite symbolism of the bond that was to hold them. And finally they took 7 steps together, hand in hand, while the priest chanted appropriate texts for each stage of life. Such was their wedding. Since then, the rites of one have been the rites of the other. Joys, griefs, and duties have been held in common. Till now, if the bride of that distant night be entirely fortunate, that prayer of her childhood is fulfilled to her in the end of her days, that prayer that said, "From the arms of husband and sons, when the Ganges is full of water, may I pass to the feet of the Lord." It has seemed to me in watching Hindu couples that they were singular in their frequent attainment of a perfect intimacy. To what is this due? Is it the early association, or the fact that courtship comes after marriage, not before? Or is it the intense discipline of absolute reserve in the presence of others? The people themselves, where their attention is called to it, attribute the fact to child marriage. I remember asking a friend of mine, a man of wealth and cultivation, orthodox and childless, if you could put away personal considerations and speak only from the outside, which do you think better in the abstract, our marriage system or yours? He paused and answered slowly, "I think ours, for I cannot conceive that 2 people could grow into each other, as my wife and I have done, under any other." Amongst the luxuries of the West, I have sometimes thought that the deepening of the human tie was proportionate to simplicity of surroundings. A people to whom all complexity of externals is impossible must live by thought and feeling, or perish in the wilderness. But whatever be the truth on this point, I have seen clearly and constantly that the master note by which the Hindu woman's life can be understood in the West is that of the religious life. This is so even with the wife. Cloistered and veiled, she devotes herself to one name, one thought, yet is never known to betray the fact, even as the nun steals away in secret to kneel before the Blessed Sacrament. The ideal that she, like the nun, pursues is that of a vision which merges the finite to the infinite, making strong to mock at separation or even at change. And the point to be reached in practice is that where the whole world is made beautiful by the presence in it of the beloved, where the hungry are fed and the needy relieved out of the joyful recognition that they wear a common humanity with his, and where, above all, the sense of unrest and dissatisfaction is gone forever, in the overflowing fullness of a love that asks no return except the power of more abundant loving. End of Chapter 3.